tin of Heinz cream of tomato soup, £1.70. Getting sent to prison for 20 months, 2.3 years, priceless. So we finally have an update on Phoebe. You know, after throwing tomato soup on a Van Gogh's priceless sunflowers painting from 1888 in central London. Those two Just Stop Oil activists, Phoebe Plummer and Anna Holland, have recently received jail sentences. Maybe I totally missed the memo here, but what did Van Gogh or his art have to do with climate change? It's obvious. They were well aware of the risks. They knew they might end up in handcuffs, but went ahead regardless. But why go this route? Well, Just Oil is clearly trying to get noticed. Consequences be damned. Because they know the media eats up those movements. They want to create a stir that makes people sit up and take notice. Something shocking that really sticks with everyone. And unfortunately, this strategy has been pushed for years in hopes of conveying the need for Britain's government to stop new fossil fuel licensing and productions entirely. While their cause is one many of us probably support in principle, their methods, however, are undeniably extreme. They've basically turned to vandalism, road blockages, trespassing on private property, and even disrupting national sports to hammer their point in. All of these actions don't really shout save the planet. They feel more like a call to let's get everyone riled up. They might have a great message, but those videos show just how badly they're missing the mark with their execution. We get it though. Activism needs to be bold and grab people's attention, and I understand that's just part of the spirit. But what these two young activists did seems to come at the cost of something much bigger, a cultural history shared in values. Just imagine being someone who's really struggling finding meaning in your life. Ironically enough, like Van Gogh did himself. According to history, he was a deeply lonely and depressed soul who poured his heart into his art. Paintings serve as a powerful reflection of his story. So seeing a bunch of punks vandalize that, well, it's honestly just disappointing and definitely not winning over anyone to listen to their message. But how did we even get to this point? So let's rewind to October 2022. When those two college student activists made headlines with their protests. Phoebe Plummer, 23, and Anna Holland, 22, joined the group Just Stop Oil. Just a few months after it started its movements across the UK, well, they took their activism to the National Gallery in London, where they threw a tin of tomato soup at a Van Gogh's famous painting, and then glued their hands to the wall. Seems to be their favourite move, doesn't it? Super gluing their hands to the wall, lightly hoping that even if the authorities intervened and arrested them, they could still get their point across while remaining inside the gallery. Although it was reported that the painting was protected by glass, the damage to its frame was estimated to be around £10,000. When they were asked why they chose tomato soup, their response was that it was something different and would highlight the UK's cost of living crisis. It's honestly very contradictory though, because on the one hand, she's talking about how people are struggling and food is becoming unaffordable, yet on the other, they are wasting soup on a priceless painting. If food is really that expensive, wouldn't it be more logical to donate it to those in need, rather than just using it in an act of vandalism? Looking at them, I mean, it seems their group can easily stock up on truckloads of Heinz tomato soup for their disruptive campaign, all thanks to one of their biggest donors, Aline Getty from the Getty Oil Company. Yes, they are trying to take down the very industry that once had their backing, but from what I've read, she finally decided to cut off the funding. They also mentioned in an interview how they chose the particular painting. Of course, they went for a famous one because of its beauty and the shock value, but it's a bit unrealistic to think throwing soup at an iconic painting is somehow going to inspire people to care more about the environment. I personally think if the protest is making people more furious with you than focused on the cause, well, maybe something is really wrong with your strategy. Another thing I would also like to point out is the fact they've done this for years and years. Obviously, it's clearly not helping at this point, and if anything, making people more mad with you, furthering the distance between wanting to help and people just getting pissed off at this point and not wanting to even talk about the cause whatsoever. In fact, I know when you talk about climate change to anyone, they don't want to even hear it anymore, and they've done this. Now we see the consequences. Phoebe Plummer was sentenced to 2 years and 3 months for additional offence, while Anna Holland received a 20-month prison sentence just this September 2024. And after their sentence were handed down, the two hugged and blew kisses to the public gallery before being taken away to their cells. It honestly seems ridiculous. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you'd usually see in a movie, but these girls are totally missing the mark with their actions once again. I guess that's probably just how the whole group as a whole has probably conditioned them at this point. Now Just Stop Oil has been in the public eye for the past few months, or years if I'm being honest, for their acts of gluing themselves to gallery walls and vandalizing art, and even gluing their hands to motorways. But what's driving these protesters? This group began in early 2022, driven by disappointment with the COP26 climate change conference in November 2001, and the frustration over the British government's decision to increase oil and gas production while also lifting the ban on fracking. They launched their direct action campaign in April of the same year, where they locked on to roads, tankers, and various infrastructures at 10 oil facilities across 4 regions in the UK, leading to hundreds of arrests. But the thing is, none of it really worked out as planned, as they themselves admitted. When they did the most obvious things, like targeting oil companies, those things didn't really make an impact. They even mentioned their activists have been calling out oil and gas companies for years, and since most people and the media just don't seem to care, we are all here witnessing all of this, and the members felt like they needed to crank things up to get people interested, even if it meant going about it in the most ridiculous ways possible. And to be honest, I think if Van Gogh was still alive, oh boy, he'd probably be even more depressed than before, while being done dirty as they throw Heinz tomato soup at your greatest works. The whole thing is just ridiculous. And Just Stop Oil doesn't seem to respect that. They think they'll come off as boring activists if they stick to the usual protests with signs and all of that. So, to get their name out there and really make a splash, they unfortunately resort to causing scenes for some serious visibility. It doesn't matter to them if people get angry or if things escalate to legal trouble, because they believe that by creating visible disruptions, they're putting pressure on the police, which in turn applies pressure on the government. And here are some videos of their protests that I bet will lead you to think their strategy is more extreme than their effect.
Oh, for God's sake.
No,
You
no,
morons.
stop it. Humanity is failing. Everything that you hold dear.
And how did you
It's
get
in
here
peril.
today?
The flower gardens that you love. The
And
artwork
all
that
you're
you
doing is
treasure.
ruining them, you brats.
Buildings that
Our
you
government
just
wants
destroy.
more oil and gas. This is a death sentence for the poorest communities around the world. This is a genocide. This is a war on the young.
We are part of Just Stop Oil. We're asking the government to stop licensing.
Now, as many of us can clearly see, this really isn't the right way to address the problem, as they are merely creating new issues along the way. There's no denying that we all want to save the planet though. Some people have no idea how to effectively contribute, and that's why we have these environmental groups that are meant to educate others, right? But this one is just downright absurd. Just Stop Oil decides to crash events like the World Snooker Championship, which has absolutely nothing to do with oil. How does a snooker game even harm the environment? Do they really believe the cue balls are made from fossil fuels or something? Also, a funny detail is that the powder the guy threw is lightly oil based too, which, well, which is kind of ironic, I guess, when you think about it, especially for so-called environmental protesters. It really looks like their go-to move for getting heard is turning people's days into chaotic messes and driving everybody nuts. Since we were little, we've been told to keep our distance from moving vehicles and not to cross the road when it's busy, but clearly some people think keep your distance is just an option. I believe that elementary kids have a better understanding of safety than these activists do, because they're obviously just putting their lives in serious danger here. They are shouting at the bus driver for being an idiot, while they are literally attempting to run in front of a moving bus. Who really is the idiot here? Realistically, the people inside are probably more focused on checking the time on their watches than on what these activists are actually yelling about, especially since they're trying to stick to their important plans, and getting interrupted by these people is just generally the last thing that they probably want, and divides people even further, which contributes to people not caring about the environment or what these people stand for. And I can't tell what's crazier, their idea that they can actually stop that bus, or their shock that everyone is ready to throw shade at them for standing in the middle of a busy road and making everybody late. I assume the passengers are just trying to get to work or school or something, but because of these stubborn activists, well, they're just left watching as their busy schedules blow up in smoke. They could have easily protested on the sidewalks or in public spaces without putting themselves in danger, because shouting their message along with moving vehicles is just asking for huge trouble. And they're definitely adding to the air pollution by making all of these cars sit there with their engines on, running. Again, contradicting themselves. It just doesn't make any sense. Well, in a similar scenario around November of 2023, things are pretty intense again during their march, which involved around 55 activists on Waterloo Bridge in London. An ambulance responding to a life or death situation found itself caught up in the situation, with paramedics stuck for about 10 minutes, which in an emergency can feel like forever. I mean, especially when every single second counts, right? Well, as these protesters clashed with the police, people started blaming the activists for holding up the ambulance. So, of course, Just Stop Oil defended their actions, stating that the ambulance wasn't actually blocked by them, but was stuck behind a police barrier and heading in a different direction from the protest. Right? I mean, okay, if we consider that version of events to be accurate, which we definitely definitely don't, it's still obvious that the delays could have put the life of a person being rescued at risk. They might not have specifically been in the ambulance's way, but just being there created enough chaos for the police to jump in. In fact, the cops had already told them to move earlier, so if they had just listened and cleared out, maybe we wouldn't even be talking about the barriers and the ambulance might have gone through. Now returning to those two young activists. Well, just hours after their sentencing, 3 other Just Stop Oil members threw soup again at Van Gogh's paintings in the same location where those 2 girls did back in 2022, and they called this act a sign of defiance. Okay. While the gallery reported that a conservator found the paintings unharmed once again, it does make you kind of wonder why the activists still think this method is really effective for driving change. It's almost like they looked at the 2 girls who got sentenced and thought, yeah, I want some of that. It makes no sense. Because honestly, if they want to keep pushing their advocacy and get taken serious while still vandalizing art, or at least attempting to, well, those they want to reach might start focusing more on their tactics than on, well, their actual message. Look, often people end up forgetting the real issue and get caught up in the controversy surrounding their actions. That's just how it is. Instead of building understanding in the right ways and gaining support for their cause, they really just risk pushing away potential allies who could resonate with their concerns. While they are correct in their advocacy, they are more than happy for that message to get lost in the delivery. If Just Stop Oil could finally realize that their disruptive movements aren't achieving the impact they want, they might actually get more people on board. I mean, isn't that obviously the way to go? With that being said, at the end of the day, they still need to win people over if they want their message to be respected and given more weight, right? If you guys think the same way, let me know. I'm just generally curious what you guys actually think about this whole situation. Like I say, I think I know most people are obviously quite bitter about Just Stop Oil. I'm really not surprised by that. Reading through a lot of these stories and what they've done nothing good here whatsoever. I don't know anyone who actually supports them. So let me know in the comments down below. Also, I'll be picking one of you guys out for a shout out in my next video, so make sure to comment ablaze. I already hit that like button, and I'll pick one of you guys for a shout out in the next video. With that all being said though, hope you guys had a fantastic week, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.